Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Friday, July the 5th, 2024. Now, I know a lot of you are here scratching your heads and wondering, what's going on? Normally, there's not a show on Friday night, and I said that a couple of months ago, we're not going to do shows on Friday night. But the guests I have tonight, I met a couple of weeks ago at the Stronger Together conference in Beausejour, put on by Manitoba Stronger Together, Ken Drysdale and Rosalie Drysdale, and what a remarkable story they shared. And I thought that everybody needs to hear this story. Plus, it's very difficult for these three to actually have the same night together where they can present the story at the same time. So Devon Harper, Gal Harper, and Megan Harper will be coming on tonight to discuss the story of Garnet Harper, who he was, and what happened to him, what he went through, what they went through, what they're still going through. And that will begin in just a couple of minutes. Shadow at Night live stream, as always, is brought to you by Canada Nano Silver, CanadaNanoSilver.ca. Hit the website, check out the retail locations. If you'd like to become a retailer of these awesome products, get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab at CanadaNanoSilver.ca. That is CanadaNanoSilver.ca. The awesome products, meaning the immune gummies and the facial serum and the natural sinus relief and the Recover Muscle Cream and the silver lozenges and, of course, the Nano Silver Gel. All available at CanadaNanoSilver.ca. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.ca. So I'm going to bring up a story that ran in the Sudbury newspaper. This is where Garnet and his family live. And here it is right here. Sudbury Star. Sudbury man refused kidney transplant due to vaccination status dies. Report. I found this story to be fair and still left me empty because it's a news story and there's not a lot of personal feeling behind it. So what we're going to do is bring in Megan. Megan is Garnet's wife. Hello, Megan. How are you?
Hi, Shadow. I'm good. How are you?
It's nice to see you again. I'm good, thank you. This is Gal, one of Garnet's brothers. Gal, thank you for coming on tonight. And Devon, thank you for joining the show tonight. Devon, you sent me a video via email yesterday, and I watched it last night.
Yeah.
And then it was very emotional. Because I know the story. I sat there and watched you guys tell it. And then I watched it again today. And I was telling Megan before the show started, I thought maybe watching it a couple more times would kind of desensitize me to it, right? Because I didn't want to start crying and get all emotional on the show here. Yeah. And it worked the opposite, where I got even more emotional than I did the first time. So I'm going to bring this video up. If you guys could all mute yourselves. Actually, no, let's not do that. Before we play the video, Megan and Gal, you were both in it. Could you please explain when this was and what the circumstances were that led up to it?
I can probably start just as far as Garnet's physical condition. So we had started dialysis in late September. Long story short is he picked up an infection from the hospital. The infection went widespread through his body and essentially caused temporary paralysis. He was unable to walk. He had back spasms. He was laying in bed and couldn't move by himself. He had a collapsed lung. There's a lot of conditions that made him feel really terrible. And he was in a substantial amount of pain and not sleeping at night. So Devon, who is here, came to join us, and he was like basically a live-in respite worker for.
Oh, okay. Now I didn't know that Devon was there already. I didn't know that part. So okay, all right.
Devon, he was filming the video. I think he was holding a camera.
Didn't realize. Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So he was here and he was helping to take care of us, and we were essentially doing trade-offs during night shift because Garnet was up all night and in pain and needed someone to be with him. And so anyways, that's the lead up to the story. And then Gal wanted to come and also be part of the care and spend some time with Garnet and help to take care of him. So he he planned a trip to Sudbury, but it was a surprise. So we didn't tell Garnet that Gal was en route to come and visit us. So that's the lead up. But yeah, you can add Gal.
I had 2 little ones at home, so I had talked to Garnet and told him I was going to try and come up as soon as possible, but I wasn't sure when exactly I could make it. So I told Devon, I can probably come up this weekend, but I don't know for sure, so don't tell him. And then by the time I knew I could come, it was close enough that we figured we'd just leave it as a surprise. So on the way there, I kept updating Devon on my ETA, and then I actually called Devon's phone as I was coming down the hill and about to turn into the driveway. And I called, and Devon put the phone next to Garnet because he was resting on the bed. And I looked at the clock as I was pulling in the driveway, and it was 11:11, just by chance. And so I said, "Hey, it's 11:11. If you could make one wish, what would it be?" And something along the lines of like, "I wish you were here." And I said, "Okay, well, someone better open the door then." And so that's kind of when Devon started. The phone call ended, and he started filming as I came in. So,
as you know, the power of your presence, Gal, it was like you're playing shorthanded, and you're finally like you got the full strength for that moment. That was just like, it was awesome.
You guys watching tonight are going to find out how close this family is. What Garnet meant still means, but first I want you to see this video. So if you guys could mute your mics for now, so we can bring this video up, and I'm going to play it here. This is the moment that Gal walks in to surprise Garnet. Megan is there. Devon is filming. Wait a minute, I'm hearing that these guys are not getting sound. Nothing is muted here. Okay, so this is a mystery to me. I'm going to stop the screen and then restart. You know what? I don't care. We'll play it again. We'll play it again because it's important you guys hear this if you're not hearing it. That's my bad. All right. Go back to the beginning. I could hear it. You guys couldn't hear it. I could hear it. All right, let's start again here.
I can't breathe. I can't. He's move the bed. Okay. Just me thinking. Gal. Gal, you're here. Gal. What's up? I can't breathe. Excuse me. I am. Oh, I'm so blessed. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. Here. Okay. Oh.
It's good, man. Take it easy. Take it easy.
Oh, you guys.
You want to ruin the surprise? Hey?
Did you know about this?
I just found out at like 7 o'clock.
Made the plan today. so.
Thank you. Oh, man. Oh.
I brought my dog.
Sit. We'll take care of him. We will accommodate.
I got the crate, so. They can sleep in the crate.
Okay, like, freaking right, man. Yo, I've been feeling so low lately, man.
I'm gonna pick you up, man.
Everybody keeps on freaking coming around. It's so crazy cool. Oh. Yo. Thank you. I know the sacrifice. Thank you. No, I know. Like, you got your own battles, man.
Hey, man.
Lord.
Picking you up is priority number one, eh? Let's get you up.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let me go. Oh.
Take it easy, down. Take it easy.
Oh.
Better mentally prepare for Thursday, eh?
Hey.
You better mentally prepare for Thursday.
Oh.
That was pretty crazy. It was 11:11. I didn't plan that part.
Yeah, you tell him down.
Oh, okay. Down.
Sit. Yeah, sit down.
Yeah, there's someone hit a moose right in front of me on the way here. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, there's I like came around the corner, and there's like a truck and trailer, and I saw the back of the trailer like start fishtailing. So I'm like, I start slowing down, and then out of nowhere, there's like a huge moose. It was like laying across a lane and a half, and I had to like swerve onto the shoulder. I ran over its like snout, and yeah, and so like, you know, start slowing down. So I'm gonna check the tire or whatever. There's two cars in the ditch.
Grab some moose meat.
It had been hit a couple times, man.
You be stones in it.
There was a car upside down, two in the ditch, one upside down, one on its side. The one that hit the moose first was just pulled over on the side, whole front end total. And then there's 4 other vehicles pulled over behind me that all had like damage to like their wheel wells and all stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, I helped a couple get out of their, like the car that was on its side. I helped a couple get out of there, and the one lady that was upside down, I helped her get out. Like,
Yeah, wow, man.
everyone's
That's
okay.
crazy.
No one was even bleeding. Like, the one car that was on its side, the guy, I assume the case of beer was in the back, but it blew up, and so like, I'm like helping him get out, and he's like drenched in beer. He's like, I wasn't drinking. It's all good. It's all good. But yeah,
You're safe.
I'm good. Yeah,
Yeah.
truck's fine too. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not really lucky.
You showed up to help.
There's nothing else.
So let's. We gotta work on some accommodations.
Oh, it's okay.
For the dogs.
Down.
Okay. So then we go right back to the beginning. You guys don't forget to unmute. How many times have each of you seen that? When's the last time you saw that, Megan?
I have not seen that video probably for a year.
Sorry.
Yeah, I
We hadn't posted that one to Facebook. That was just like a family moment. So like not a lot of people have seen that.
Yeah.
I watched it tonight actually, like a couple hours ago. That's the first time I'd seen it since probably over a year.
You live in London, right, Gal?
Yeah, that's right.
So how long a drive to Sudbury? Like, what's it, about 6 hours?
Yeah, about that. Between 5 and 6, depending on traffic.
And it's November, I think you went up there, so not great conditions, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And you saved some people along the way. Was that on that drive?
Yeah, well, it almost took me out because there's a lot of moose, northern Ontario, right? And
Yeah.
I really, if there wasn't a car in front of me, I probably would have driven right into the moose because it came up fast. I saw the taillights fishtail ahead of me, and that kind of gave me the warning to slow down because something was on the road. And even with me slowing down, I probably dropped down to about 75, 80 kilometers an hour. And I still had to swerve really fast, and I nicked the edge of it. So, yeah, it was close.
That's crazy. I mean, it's funny. You get there after all that, the 6 hours in the car, the moose, the pulling people out of cars and all of that. And that wasn't even the biggest moment of your night.
No.
Yeah. For everybody else, that's like, wow, man, that's like one of the biggest moments of my life. You went to go see your brother. Why did you go that particular day? Was it just something told you that you needed to?
I really was just trying to get up there as soon as possible. So, that was literally the soonest I could get up there. So I just got in the truck and left. I didn't even really bring much with me because I knew Devon and I could share clothes or whatever. So I just went as soon as I could.
I want to hear from each of you, and I'm going to ask you some of the same questions I asked in Beausejour, because I think it's important for the people watching to hear, and many of them weren't there. The closeness of your family. First of all, tell us about your family, the Harper family. It's a large blended family, right?
Yeah. Megan, do you have the family tree there? Or what?
No, I don't.
Well, she's added a few more with Garnet, but the original family, like our aunt and uncle adopted 5 Harper siblings, and they already had 4 daughters and adopted 3 more siblings. And then our biological mom was remarried and had a couple more. So yeah, family of 14 kids, 13 siblings. So Gal, Garnet, and I being about 2 years apart each. Garnet would be turning 37 this year. I'm 39, and Gal, 33.
I'll be 35 on the 17th.
35. Don't forget.
Just take it as a compliment.
But, yeah, in terms of connected, it was Gal, Garnet, and I. We were the boys, and we kind of stuck together through thick and thin. And there was definitely moments that tested our bond, and we continued to carry those through to today. So to be able to capture that moment, Gal and I both have plenty of footage. It's just a matter of I didn't share it with him yet. It was taken up. It was on my phone, and anyway, I'm trying to transfer a few files, but he's like, you got to send me that clip, and I was like, yes, I do. It's a duty because it's such a gift, and to be able to replay moments like that, it's it's just can't say enough of just being able to capture those moments. It's just to be there, and we're tight. Dalgar and I are tight. Just everything together.
How much are you guys still hurting from all of this? Megan, I'm going to start with you.
There's not a day that goes by that I don't see him somewhere or think of how he's missing in our day to day. So I mean, it's you can't put words on that kind of thing. I mean, I've heard people say that losing a spouse is probably amongst the hardest things to people to lose in your life because really it just shatters everything. It changes how you do every single little action in your life because there's a void now that's existing. So I mean, the way that I work, the way that my kids are cared for, the way that my finances work, the way that I cook meals, the way that I do laundry, housework, like you name it. I have to train my dog is now my responsibility to train when it was supposed to be his, right? Like all of these different things that it just becomes this void. And so, you know, you have to learn to live with it over time. And that's what we've tried to do kind of moving forward. And, you know, we're about a year and a half, no, we're a year and a year and 2 months now past the time when he passed away. So, it's been a long road and, you know, some days are harder than others, but, you know, we're managing. So
It's the injustice of it. I mean, if it was something that could not be stopped,
yeah,
right? If the doctors came out and said we did everything we could do, and you could probably resign yourselves to that, I think most people could. It's not easy. It's never easy. But when something like this happens, it's crazy. Before we get into that story, I want to ask you guys, Gal and Devon, when he left, when Garnet died, what did you lose? I mean, who was Garnet to you? Let's start with you, Gal.
Garnet was, he still is everything to me. I mean, I was the youngest of those 13 siblings that Devon mentioned, and Garnet was the one closest in age to me. And when I went to live with our aunt and uncle, I was only a year and a half. Garnet was 3.5, and being the youngest in a house that busy, you know, you don't always get adult attention as often as maybe someone in a only child household might. So I really looked to Garnet as my guide on how to survive, not just in the house, but just in life in general. He was. It may sound strange to some, but Garnet really was like a father figure to me growing up, and even as an adult, I always looked to him for guidance. He was always right about everything. Every time we had an argument, you know, he never tried to rub it in or anything. He just waited for me to smarten up, come around, and then, you know, he's just happy that I learned the lesson necessary. So right now, it's for him to be taken the way that he was. There's so much with the grief, right? There's the anger, the frustration. You know, there's so many people who I feel like they should be more angry, you know, family members even that are hesitant to bring up his story because of all the stuff that's attached to it, and they don't want to get into it with people because they're worried about, you know, putting themselves on a certain side of an issue. And you know, I have moments throughout my day where you know, we were very competitive growing up. Being 2 years apart, it was like everything I wanted to do was just to be better at him and stuff. And Garnet was just naturally gifted in so many things, whether it was athletics, whatever he wanted to do, he became good at it instantly, right? Basketball.
I hate
golf.
guys like that. I hate it.
Oh, it was awful. But you know what? Iron sharpens iron, and the things that I'm best at in life is really just because I was trying to be better than Garnet. And
Very dominant will to win.
yeah, and it's you know, but as far as like how his passing has affected me, it's really taken a lot for me to try and reprogram my brain on you know, finding joy in certain things. So something as simple as, the NBA finals happened last year, and my favorite team won, and I didn't care. It was like, I can't call Garnet and talk about it. The only reason they're my favorite team is because he made me pick a team, so I didn't bandwagon hop. There's just so much stuff attached to it. So like, I had friends talking to me about the finals and congratulating me as you normally do when like a friend's team wins some kind of championship, and I just like I forgot that it even happened, and things don't mean as much to me anymore that used to, right? I stopped caring about things because it's like, well, in the grand scheme of things, they got away with murder. My brother's gone. None of this matters, right? So trying to find joy in certain things has been difficult, but I've definitely found a way to, to find a purpose in a lot of ways and refocus my energy in positive ways. So it's been a struggle, but we're working through it.
Devon, this you guys talk about this large family, 13 siblings or 14. You lose count after a bit, and I would imagine that a family that large, when it comes to that many siblings, would tend to branch off into different groups, right? Like there's 3 here, 4 there, 5 there, and they all become closer. Maybe I've never experienced anything like that. I mean, I got one sister, and that's it. So I don't know, but maybe the certain subgrouping would become closer. Let's say you 3 guys, than maybe the older ones. Is that the way it went with your family?
I feel
was
like
it you 3 and everybody else?
We were often the boys. I mean, like mom and dad would like, get the boys, or the boys are doing this. It was just like our own terminology for the family, like, or the girls would be the girls, except it would it was very consistent. But in terms of my arrival, I felt like I was the middle child, so nobody cared about me. There's like, I was responsible for nothing, and it's kind of like nobody took notice. But like Gal and Garnet took notice. It was like, hey, we got another brother in town. It's like, it was like a blow up from there, like our bond, right? Because I just felt like the attention that we provided each other was everything we needed. And when I say like we did everything together, like when I was playing football in high school, Garnet was literally running the sidelines with me, cheering us on, and like he might as well have just been on the field. And eventually he was, and that's another like wrinkle in the whole story. But football was something that we kind of bonded on, and sports, and that mentality of not giving up. And you saw that in the clip, right? And so when you have a soldier that's down, we just knew we always had each other's backs. I remember getting lost with Garnet in the bush, and it was like we had kind of like snuck off. Like we were part of like a camping trip with probably about 20 to 30 kids. My dad drove a bus to I think it was High Falls near Sudbury, and they're like, oh, don't go too far. And Garnet and I were like, we'll go wherever we want. We'll get back. And then the bus is like getting started. Like my dad's like, we're gonna go home, and it's a long walk home. Like you're not gonna make it. But Garnet and I were like looking at each other. It starts to rain, and we're like, okay, well, the train's over here. We know we parked near the train, so if we can get to the tracks, we'll be okay. But it was just something about being lost with Garnet. It was like we still had no worries. Like we're gonna be okay. And that was like reminiscent. A lot of different moments in life were kind of just like that. So a couple examples.
Megan, how did you meet him?
It's a funny story that involves very much younger versions of ourselves, and only one of us was sober, and it was me. So we met in the basement of a church at a young adults cafe. I was there with a group of friends of mine, which included another one of their brothers, and Garnet was also there with his friends because it was the church that he was attending on Sundays. But him and his friends were drinking, and it wasn't coffee that they were drinking like what I was drinking with my friends. So I was there to drink the coffee and play the cards, and Garnet was there for other reasons. But we ended up meeting because he came over to say hi to his brother, and in doing so thoroughly embarrassed himself and his brother, tried to join in our game of cards and failed miserably at doing so.
How hammered was he? Was he like wasted completely, or just a little bit?
He wasn't like falling over, but he was not able to play a game of cards. But anyways, it was one of those, terrible first impressions. But we grew to get to know each other later on because we continued to hang out with the same
Let,
group
let
of
me add,
friends.
let me add something important.
Yeah.
Garnet thought you were gorgeous, and he made it a goal to talk to you again. Don't forget that part.
Yeah. Okay, that's true. Yeah. So we met each other a few more times after that, and got to know each other really well, and that's sort of the rest is history, I guess. So.
You know, this is something I don't think I asked you that night in Beausejour when we were talking. And how are your kids doing?
Yeah, they're doing pretty well. I mean, considering the circumstances, I would say the loss hit all of them really hard, and I think at a lot of different levels. Like my oldest was only 10, when he died, about to turn 11, and so she and he, my oldest daughter Ava, they had a very, very close bond, and they had since she was born. I mean, that was just something that they shared on a really, really deep level, and so she was really, really impacted, and I think continues to be so. My son is the youngest. He's 4 now. He was only 2 when Garnet died, and so he continues to not really understand, but he still asks me almost every day, um, where his dad is, and everything. Like, I keep on repeating the same line, Daddy lives in the sky now, and, he died. And so he's starting to sort of understand the idea that he's gone and he's not coming back. But I mean, those are really painful conversations to have. I mean, there was a moment I remember when, it was just a couple of days after Garnet had died, and my kids were at my in-laws' place spending the day while Devon and I went to the funeral home to start to make some arrangements. And we pulled in the driveway in my van with Devon in the front seat, and Judah, my son, watched us pull in the driveway and got really excited because he thought it was his dad in the front seat. And he chased the van up the driveway, and then when Devon and I got out, he sort of ran circles around the car looking for Garnet and not understanding why he wasn't exiting the vehicle. So, I mean, it's moments like that that are just, engraved in your brain. You're never going to forget. I mean, it's guiding children through this while also trying to manage my own grief on top of it. It has been the most impossible task of my life.
You have got support from so many people across the country, and that's one thing. And I totally understand how it is to wake up to dozens of emails or messages, even snail mail in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to the family, that's a whole different thing. Has the family rallied, your friends, everybody has been there and tried to fill those gaps?
Yeah, you
somehow?
know what? Yes. And so, and that is something that has been a theme of the last year and a bit for me, 2 years even while Garnet was sick, which is that family is those who show up and show up consistently, and it's not defined by blood, because we have an amazing family of really close friends. Yes, there's biological family in there also, but the people that I count as our family are the people who were here day in and day out, and they have taken care of us and still do. I mean, Friday mornings, I have the same lady who comes to watch my kids. She's been coming to watch my kids since Garnet started dialysis 2 years ago, and she still
Wow.
comes every single Friday morning. And so, like, these are the people who are literally have been my backbone over the last year, and they have not given up. They have been here for me. They cooked meals, they did my laundry, they cleaned my house. They did so much for me when everything first happened, and all of that support has continued. People still check in on me, and I'm so thankful for that. It was honestly, Shadow, this was something that Garnet he was going to turn it into essentially his life's work, which was to gather people together, circle wagons, and build a community. And he had started a group called All for Independence, and his vision was to have this go nationwide, where everybody would have in their city their freedom community or their community of like-minded people who would be there to support each other in case we needed it in an emergency, but also whenever everybody needed each other. So he was looking to try to gather like-minded people together to build this kind of family structure. And it's so strange how the universe works like this, but it ended up being my family that ultimately benefited from it in his absence, because it was the group of people that he started together only months before he died. that were the ones who showed up and really got me through that year.
Garnet recognized what was going on with this whole thing before most other people. Am I right?
Yeah, 100%.
Gal, you've got a great story about that.
Yeah. So I assume you're alluding to the BLM stuff.
Yep.
So,
Yes, I am.
so yeah, and that in itself too, like there's so many parts of the story that we tell in short pieces, but like really everything is like a 2-hour story. Obviously I won't
Okay,
do that
so
right
listen, I mean, when you're telling a story, I mean, feel free, the three of you, because you guys are connected together mentally and spiritually. You finish each other's sentences, what I noticed that night in Beausejour. So if one of you forgets part of a story, or if you want to add something in, just feel free, go ahead, do it. Because
like Megan, you're telling the story about people providing, and like, yes, we have to say that, but like one example, I'm on the phone like getting help from a friend, Amy. She's getting toys together so the kids can play at the memorial and have a bouncy house. Someone else is pulling up the driveway to drop off food so we don't have to cook that night for the whole family to eat, more than enough. Okay, in the fridge that our cousin gave us, that we put beside in the carport. And meanwhile, the who's the friend that cuts Tony? Tony's coming to cut the lawn. Like he sent his business to cut our lawn for us, so I don't have to bother cutting the lawn, or whoever. So like those are like moments in time. Like it crushed me. The generosity of people was like, it was crushing. And like Garnet, yes, in the loss, gave us so much in terms of people, relationships, and the community that he was like all for. Right. So just sorry to add that.
No, that's cool. That's exactly what I'm kind of hoping for. I mean, moments like that, you just kind of sit back and go, "Oh my God!" Like you almost feel bad, right? It's people doing all these things you didn't ask them to do, but they're just taking it upon themselves. So Gal was big into the BLM. This was around the George Floyd time, right? So this was that summer when all of the riots were happening. And please continue.
Yeah. So I had always been like growing up in Sudbury, Northern Ontario. We did grow up with racial discrimination and racism, and it's something that impacted Garnet and I and Devon as kids. And I actually remember it was Trayvon Martin in 2010, I think it was. It was a long time ago.
2012, I think it was. But anyway, yeah, I know what you mean.
So it was kind of the first moment that kind of got me, it really struck home, especially since Garnet and I were similar age at the time, and we had experiences. So that kind of like resonated with me. And then when the George Floyd thing happened, I was instantly, drawn into the Black Lives Matter movement, because I had
emotions are hard.
It plays on your trauma, right? And so I got involved with an activist group here. It wasn't part of the Black Lives Matter organization, but it was Black Lives Matter London. Anyways, at that time, Garnet was kind of like he was warning me, like, well, Black Lives Matter, are you aware about this with Planned Parenthood and this? And he starts telling me all these things about Black Lives Matter. And I kept being dismissive and being like, it's not Black Lives Matter, this is separate, like this is just our own little grassroots thing, and it's not like that, right? And he kept telling me, like, I don't know why you're spending so much energy on this, like it's this and that and whatever. And it was during the beginning of COVID stuff. He really started speaking out right away when masks were first being worn. I don't even think they were mandated at the time yet, but he was really vocal about how none of this stuff making sense. And this is what's going to happen. It's not just a mask, right? Eventually they're going to make you wear the mask, and then next thing it's going to be a vaccine. And he literally predicted the future accurately. And I remember during some of my activism work with BLM, he like said something that like really bothered me, and I remember kind of having a private conversation with him, just being like, man, I don't understand like why you don't feel the same way I do about this. Like, you grew up, you experienced racism still, like, why don't you care about this stuff? And he's like, well, it's not that I don't care, like, it's just when I encounter racism, I deal with it at the time. Like, this stuff, the COVID stuff, I feel like if something's going to kill me, it's not going to be racism. It's going to be all this COVID nonsense. And he ended up being right. And that was something where once the mandates started coming out, that's kind of when I was like, okay, this isn't lining up. And then I actually tried to use my platform with BLM to they approached us. Or sorry, I should say who they is. Public Health in London, Middlesex London Health Unit. They approached us, members of Black Lives Matter, and asked us to participate in a panel to set up a vaccination clinic that was going to target the Black community in London, because vaccine hesitancy was very prevalent in the Black community, right? For good reason. So I was chosen as one of the people to speak in this private chat with Middlesex Health Unit officials, and I tried to use it as an opportunity to have a sit-down conversation with London's quote-unquote top doctor, Dr. Chris Mackey. And I told Garnet,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Garnet had convinced you this was all a bunch of BS, because it sounds to me like you were more interested in what the BLM thing was doing than anything to do with the masks or the vaccines or any of that stuff. So how long did that take for him to convince you of that? Was it like a weekend thing, or did it take a few months?
It feels in hindsight like it didn't take very long, but as I reflect on it, like after the last time we spoke about it, it didn't take a long time for him to convince me. It took a long time for me to understand the severity of it. So
okay.
He had started sending me stuff about the masks, and he's like, hey, they don't work for viruses, right? And that didn't take very long to convince me of, because it's like, okay, I wear an N95 when I sand drywall, and I still get drywall dust coming in. So virus particles are going to come in. This is making sense, right? And I remember saying to him, like, well, it's not a big deal. It's just for like a couple weeks. Like, I'm just going to do it. And he's like, but yeah, like, it's not going to stop there, right? And wearing it is telling them that you're okay going along with it, right? And it's kind of, you show them what they can do and get away with, and then they do the next thing, right? And so then as soon as they started talking about the vaccines, I was like, okay, I see where this is headed, right?
Right.
So with that talk about the vaccines, I told Garnet, I was like, I'm going to use this opportunity where I'm sitting down with the doctor, and I'm going to ask him questions about the vaccines that I know the answers already. And so because I was part of BLM, they thought I was a safe person to host the interview, and I was going to help them persuade and coerce the Black community to get vaccinated at an accelerated rate. And they asked me for a list of questions in advance. That
there was some nice perks too. There were some perks to that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And anyways, a very long story short.
What perks? What were they going to give you?
Money.
Yeah. So they offered to pay us, as they called us vaccine champions, right? And they wanted to pay us. I don't remember how much it was, but regardless, public health was going to pay us to promote the vaccine to the Black community.
Vaccine champions.
And there was talk of, how can we do this, right? So there was talk of doing a mobile clinic where they go door to door just to Black people's homes and offer them the vaccine. There was talk of hosting it, what they ultimately ended up doing was they hosted a Black vaccination clinic. So the clinic was hosted by Black London Network, which was an organization that I helped found, which had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter or public health. It was supposed to be just bringing because the Black community is diverse, right? You've got the African diaspora, the Caribbeans, right? So it was supposed to be, here's the Black London Network. If you're Black and you're in London and you want to get to know what people from Jamaica are doing and try different foods, whatever, right? It's supposed to be just like a networking hub.
So they
used that to host the vaccine clinic, right? They had black nurses administering the vaccines, and they had like a DJ with free food and all this stuff, right? So again, like I said, I could go on for hours about all the messed up stuff that they did to try and get Black people vaccinated in London. But long story short, I was set to have a sit-down interview one-on-one with Dr. Chris Mackey, and they found out a couple days before the interview was supposed to happen. I guess they kind of found out what side I was on, because we were
On the mole.
I was telling them what questions I was going to ask. And then I was like, oh, you know, they're just like regular questions. And again, it was being presented as if these aren't my questions. These are questions that the Black community has. So I said to them, I was like, you know, a lot of people are concerned about aborted fetal cells in the vaccines. I know that's not in there, but I'm still going to have to ask you, right? Stuff like that. And, you know, like, is the vaccine approved and stuff like that? And then one of the nurses that was on was like, oh, yeah, well, that's a common one. It is approved. I was like, well, I mean, technically, it's still in phase 3 of the trials, and it's only authorized under emergency use or whatever. And that kind of, I shouldn't have said that, because at that moment she goes, "What did you say you did for work again?" And like, "Oh, I'm just a contractor. Like, I have a renovation company." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And then their tone totally changed after that. And then by the next day, they changed it to they were going to have 3 doctors on, along with myself. And Black doctors from Toronto. And then last minute, the day before we were supposed to do this interview, they cut me out of it completely. And instead they do a PowerPoint presentation, and people can type in questions and submit them, and they'll get screened. And if their question is good, they'll answer the question on the live. And so they totally they're like, no, we don't want. And in an email, Gal, some of your questions may actually, the answers to some of your questions may lead to increased vaccine hesitancy. So we don't think.
So that's it for you being a vaccine champion. Listen,
Yeah.
I have to ask you guys, and I'm going to throw something out here. If I were Black and I had people like doing this shit to try and get me to take a vaccine, I would look at them because it's almost like they're treating you like children or something, right? Like, I mean, instead of like, you're people, you're just like anybody else, man. I mean, I don't care what the color of your skin is, and so, you know, like, well, you're Black, so they're going to have a DJ and they're going to do all of these cliche things in order to draw Black people into this. Like, come on, man, that just sounds.
The most insulting part was sitting on the panel when public health asked all of us, we were supposed leaders of the Black community, right? Which in itself, the way they handpicked these so-called leaders, like, why did they pick me? Like, I joined Black Lives Matter. I don't know a lot of Black people in London. Like, I haven't been here long enough to be in with the Black community, right? But they picked me because I'm part of BLM. And then they picked the Black pastor. And they picked, you know, it's the most random people. And then they asked, why do you think Black people don't want to get the vaccine? And I sat back and I waited and I listened to some of the answers. One of them was, well, you know, oftentimes Black people don't have access to a computer, or they struggle to get the information online. Oh, okay, so we're dumb then, right? Another one was the Reverend said that, you know, I think if we all get vaccinated and post pictures on Facebook that we did it, I think that would put a lot of confidence in my congregation. And it's like, okay, so monkey see, monkey do? Is that what we're going with? Like, the reasons they gave were so racist. I was like, this is ridiculous. I was like, does anyone think that maybe it has to do with the lack of trust in public health due to, you know, a history of medical experimentation, right? I mean, obviously I said it in a way that wasn't going to give me away, but I was the only one. And
you couldn't do that, man. Like, how long could you sit there and play that role before you just went, you guys are just right? Like, seriously, Tuskegee experiments. Seriously. You know, it's not. But even all these years later, I mean, like, the Tuskegee experiments probably should ring in everybody's brains, not just Black people, even though that's who they were experimenting on back in the 50s, which I find appalling. But anyway, as you were going through this, what was Garnet saying to you?
So while I was going through that, I would talk to Garnet and Devon after these calls, right? And that was the only thing that kept me from outing myself and just freaking out on these people, right? I was like, yo, can you believe what they said? Like, this is what I just sat through, right? And really what helped keep me calm was like the goal. The goal for me was I want to sit down with a doctor and make him answer my questions, right? And that's why I wanted it to be a live sit down so that I could ask him a question and then he can give his answer that they give him on a piece of paper. But then when I ask a follow-up question where it makes him explain and he can't, and I can as a local contractor, right? It would really help save a lot of Black people from getting vaccinated, in my opinion, right? So that was my goal, was to actually help the Black community and prevent them from getting duped. And instead, it ended up being this PowerPoint presentation where they were literally telling pregnant Black women to go ahead and get vaccinated. Like, it was just sickening. And in the end, me being opposed to vaccine mandates was what ended up getting me kicked out of BLM. Yeah, ironically enough. So it was during the campaigns, the political campaigns. I think it was right after someone in London threw rocks at Trudeau, which that was a great moment in London history. Throwing rocks at the sitting prime minister at all, but I can't say I was mad that it was in London. So anyways, that had happened, and one of the lead activists for BLM went on this rant on Facebook about, if you vote for PPC and you're Black, something about, you can't say that you care about your own people and this and that. Basically, you're a sellout and stuff, right? And so all I said was, of all the political parties, which one discriminates the most, right? And that right there, that challenge, that was enough to get me kicked out. I mean, not to mention Ariel Kayabaga, the Liberal MP. She was a city councillor in London when I was with BLM, and I talked with her a lot. But then as soon as the vaccine stuff started coming out, I tried talking to her and being like, hey, look, like, they're trying to do this vaccine clinic for the Black community, and like, this thing's not approved and this and that. And she just said to me, I think it's great that they're doing this clinic. My son got vaccinated and I think it's the best thing ever, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, there goes all that hope. I mean, she was running as a Liberal, so you kind of can't expect much. But there was stuff about funding being pulled from city funding that we were supposed to get for programs, because there was all these initiatives during the height of BLM, right? We're going to give money to the Black community to hear their voices and this and that, right? And so I was supposed to be doing this show and getting funding through the Black London Network to do that. And I was going to do a podcast where I sit down with doctors or whoever and have interviews, right? And then Ariel Kayabaga actually messaged another one of the activists and said, hey, y'all speaking about vaccines a lot, and like, I'm just saying, I'm just warning you, like, if he keeps with that COVID vaccine narrative, like, the funding might get pulled, kind of thing, or I'm worried that it might get pulled, right? So I was basically told, like, okay, quiet down or the money's going to go in. I was like,
be a COVIDiot.
Say again, Devon?
Well,
Be a COVIDiot.
COVIDiot, right? Yeah, that's one of the big. So what you're saying then is that public funding for BLM or whatever was tied to your vaccine philosophy. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's something we've been saying for the past 4 years now. It's political. It has nothing at all to do with making you better, protecting you from any kind of virus. This is all political. At the time that you were going through all of this, Megan, back up to you. Garnet was starting to do rallies, right? Like right from the beginning. See, he'd been doing rallies on weekends, and I remember asking you this question. Your answer was pretty funny. He said when he first started doing the rallies, like, were you eye rolling? Were you with them all together, or did you completely understand what he was even doing yet?
I was supportive of him all the way along. I was not a activist person per se before COVID. When I went to my first rally in 2021, it was a very uncomfortable experience for me, just personally, because it's just not something that I had ever participated in before. But that was the first time that we sort of discovered that there was more people like us in our city. And from there, it's just when things just started to take off. I mean, I think at that first rally, Garnet grabbed a megaphone and just started talking unscripted in the microphone and just hyping up the crowd like he does. And people were like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? It's a crowd of 150 people. And it was just from there, people just sort of started to be drawn to him. And he was a very magnetic person. He had a very charismatic personality and just always attracted people wherever he went. He was very good at oration. He could just get up in front of a crowd unscripted, like, someone hand me a mic and I'll just be well spoken. Like, that was Garnet. But then at the same time, he was also very caring and loved to talk to people one-on-one, and he remembered faces and names, and I just still am boggled by how he did that. But he was also very personable, like, to the individual, right? So he was a very unique person like that. And so he was really amazing at gathering people together, bringing our city together. And he coordinated a lot of really important events in our city. We went to the local science center when they shut out people with paid memberships and told them they weren't allowed to go into the science center if they weren't vaccinated. We went to, there was a rally at my place of work, which was one that I was less than impressed about because there was some volatile situations happening there at the time for me. So that was
what kind of volatile situations? Were people just looking at you the wrong way, or
I didn't
were they-
actually attend that one, Shadow. That one was one that I stayed home for, as conflict of interest because of details that I probably may not be able to share here. But I was working at the university in Sudbury, and I was not allowed to continue working there because I didn't submit my proof of vaccination. So there was I was in fights with my HR and union at the time. And so anyways, that happened, and it caused some grief for me in the background, but it, ended up happily at the end. So everything was fine. But that was a stressful one for me. So, but he did, he rallied there and he brought people there because they were not allowing students to attend university in person and go into the classroom if they didn't submit their vaccination papers. And so it was a really wild time across the province, and I think across the country, for education, post-secondary education. So that was one.
Still is. There's still a lot of universities, believe it or not, that actually require you to be vaccinated, like a couple of vaccinations. So wait a minute. You want me to have a vaccination that's like, what, 2 years old now? Right? Like,
yeah, and they're starting to recall off the shelves at the same time. Right? So it's crazy. I know. So anyways, yes, to answer your question, he did a lot of this activism work. He did big scale rallies like that got a lot of attention, had police presence on purpose to keep everybody safe, and a lot of different things he coordinated. But then at the same time, he also did just like simple, this is how you take a stand as an individual in your community. So he would go on Facebook Live at least once a week, sometimes multiple times a week, and he would literally just go grocery shopping with no mask on. And he would just go on Facebook Live, have his phone, and he'd just be having a conversation with whoever was watching him live on Facebook and say, hey, you know what? This is how you do it. Just go into the grocery store. No one's going to stop you, And I think people, once they saw someone doing that, they latched onto the idea, and that's really gave a lot of people their confidence as far as, okay, yeah, like I know this is wrong, but now I'm seeing someone actually stand up against it. I can do that too.
I wish I'd have known him back then. Devon, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the dialogue between Megan and Garnet, like when you'd be given like direction from work, it was just beautiful to see like how that kind of unfolded. Like Garnet would look it up and see what our rights are and what the law actually says, right? And so to like see that play out like week to week, day to day, and a lot of those relationships are still haven't been repaired, but it has created like an intense dialogue, and just to be able to see how like you guys worked that together was really interesting because you guys stood your ground, stood on the hill, like, and it was just to see it like how it evolved from like you get a note saying you have to start wearing a mask at work now, and here's your vaccine requirement protocol, and Garnet would just like, okay, let's see what it actually says. What kind of ground are they standing on to say this, right? So a lot of times people will say like, oh, this is not the hill to die on. Well, like Garnet looked at it as like, this is the hill. And so when we say we're on the hill, this is what we mean. Like, we don't like change our position on what's right and wrong for anybody. So
he's the kind of person who he heard something once and it was like locked and loaded. Like it was there, he was ready with it. And so he did a lot of research. He listened to a lot of people who were in the legal field, and he was able to essentially dissect things just as a normal person, just to say like, listen, these are recommendations, like this isn't law, so like there is no leg to stand on. And so if you are issued a ticket, okay, you'll be issued a ticket, that ticket's not going to go to trial, right? So, and actually he walked the walk. Like I have
a bunch of tickets.
I have tickets, and I have trespass letters that he received from various places because people just didn't want him there, and they called the police. And so I've got this, I'm going to make like this, wall of honor or something in my house with everything framed, but I've got all of his tickets from the police. I've got his trespass letters, and it was literally like none of it went anywhere because none of it was legal. So all of the tickets got waved off. They weren't even filed correctly by the police officer. It was like it was a scare tactic. And then the trespass letters I've still got, but I mean, they don't mean anything. He went back to Walmart 4 times after they trespassed.
Trespass letters. I always find it just the trespass, man. You're banned for a year. Oh, really?
No, Shadow. He got banned for 50 years from a local hardware. Yeah.
I got banned for life, but I
And
can't.
the funniest part there is I told him, I said, you know what? Now I won't be able to go there either. Because in the country where like we all get mixed up for each other. So
Right.
trespassed and we're all trespassed.
So how long was he doing this before the first signs of him being sick? Was it a couple of years? Was he like really going hard on this, you guys?
It was about a year. I mean, it felt like a lot longer, but I think it was about a year.
There were other things before that, kind of like, you know, when they started putting up all these towers for surveillance. That was kind of, you know, let's look into this a little bit.
Right.
And I think that was around the same time where they locked everything down to expedite perhaps that process. So
Yeah.
Started feeling really terrible right around the convoy. So like winter of 2022, early 2022. And that's when, you know, the first sign and what got us onto all of this was his blood pressure. So we knew that he had high blood pressure and it was starting to worry us. So
he had never had anything like that before. Like he was always pretty healthy guy.
he was getting really tired, and he'd been attacking his like workouts. Like we were doing some training just to like really see if we could find an edge. This was when he was a little bit stronger, and he'd been really tired, fall asleep whenever he could, I guess. But
so he was a type 1 diabetic. He had been a type 1 diabetic since he was a child. So that causes all of its own like health complications. You have to really manage that as a condition. It's the type where you are reliant on injectable insulin because your pancreas shut down and it doesn't function. It's classified as an autoimmune disease. So essentially, your body cannot produce insulin, so you have to inject it yourself based off of the food that you eat. But then this can cause all kinds of extra problems, including a lot of microvascular issues. So we had seen him go through eye trouble. He had hemorrhaging in his eyes, which caused him to be partially sighted. He never regained eyesight in his left eye because of a botched surgery that happened one time. So he was working with just one eye for a really, really long time, I think from 2016 forward. And then his other eye hemorrhaged in 2018. And so then he was blind. You couldn't see anything. And we were pregnant. I delivered our child and he didn't see her face for the first 6 weeks of her life until he was able to get the surgery done. And that one was successful. We went with a better doctor. But anyway, so he had some health complications, but it was the kind of thing where it was a difficult condition to live with, but we learned to manage it really well. And we got through all of these health struggles, and he never let any of it bring him down or affect him. That's the kind of person that he was. He was a very tenacious person. He fought through everything all the time. And so, and he tried to stay as positive as he could. So he despite going through a lot of really, really challenging things that I think would have sent anybody else into like a deep depression, he was determined to still live strong and be the best person that he could be for me, for the kids, and for everybody around him. So,
but then, I mean, the inevitable starts to happen where you have to go to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
Like it's getting to the point now where, when was it diagnosed that it was a kidney problem? Because as you pointed out, he was a type 1 diabetic, and that led to all kinds of issues. But I mean, you know, Devon, you were saying his workouts weren't the same as they were. He was getting tired. When did you guys first realize he can't just fight through this anymore? He's got to go see a doctor.
2022, I remember we played golf because Garnet really, really liked golf. I mean, I don't like to use the word love when it's not relational, but he liked golf a lot. So we got him out on the course. So that summer, I think it was it your birthday, Gal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that in London?
no, that was the one in Sudbury up here when you guys played. I think it was around his birthday.
Right.
Yeah. So it was 2022, and like he was strong enough to golf, but we were kind of, you know, it was a big event. it was a big event for him. It really started to drain a lot from him, and so for him to almost like cut the game short, like I think we took notice that like something was, he was really battling, really fighting. Because
So
like we used to play, long past the sun going down, weather doesn't matter, right? But yeah, that what really stuck out for me.
yeah, he essentially, the high blood pressure was the tip off that he was not doing well and he was getting tired. This was around February. And so he went to his doctor. His doctor prescribed him a medication. The medication that he was taking started to make him feel worse, and it wasn't bringing his blood pressure down. So then the doctor took him over the phone because it was COVID. So we don't see doctors in person. And he was talking to him over the phone and was explaining to him what was going on. Gave him a blood pressure reading that we had taken at home, and the doctor said, double your dose of this medication. So Garnet did that for about a week, started feeling absolutely terrible, and decided to get a second opinion. So we went to a naturopath at that point, which is ultimately the route that he would have preferred to go all the way along, because he had a distrust of the medical system, I think, from the beginning. But ultimately went to the naturopath. The naturopath did what his doctor should have done, which is order a full panel of blood work to see what else is going on in his body. And that revealed that he had kidneys that were failing. So that's where.
Do you remember? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Megan. Remember what Dr. Trotzy said when you were telling this story on stage in Beausejour? Like I remember looking over at him, and I had to apologize to him the next day after that. I said, because I felt like I was blaming him right in that moment. Because when you said that, he goes, well, I mean, why would they double the dose of a drug that is clearly not working and probably actually harming him? And without taking a panel or finding out exactly what it was doing. He was beside himself at that point.
Right.
Anyway, please continue.
And his doctor ended up calling him 2 days later and said to him, you need to stop taking that medication that we just doubled because it's hurting you. This essentially was a direct quote from the doctor. So, I mean, he finally clued in after he finally got the labs that he didn't order, that the medication he prescribed was a mistake. So anyways, take from that what you will. But we got that diagnosis. Then it was stage 5 kidney disease, which is the worst. So as soon as you hit stage 5, which is below 15% function, you have to start dialysis or join a transplant list in order to get your condition resolved. So what we did is we were referred to a nephrologist because, of course, like this is a really serious condition. So we made sure that we followed with the medical advice. We went to go see his nephrologist. Sorry, when I say went to go see, we met the nephrologist on Skype because they wouldn't allow him in the hospital because he wasn't vaccinated or wearing a mask. Anyway, and so then we worked with the nephrologist and told him we wanted to try to delay dialysis as long as we could because we have a young family and we wanted to try to maintain our quality of life at least through the summer, so that, because as soon as you start dialysis, you're hooked up to a machine and you're dependent on this machine 3 days a week for 4 hours at a time. So it's 12 hours a week total. And it essentially takes over. So we decided to delay that with the doctor's blessing, and we're able to put it off using natural, medications and solutions prescribed by different natural-minded doctors until about September of 2022. And that's when we ultimately had to present to the hospital because we couldn't continue.
And so what happened then?
Well, we presented to the hospital to begin dialysis, and the first step of beginning dialysis is to have a central line put in, which essentially goes, into your heart through your jugular, and then it hangs outside your body as like an access point where they can hook you up to your dialysis machine. So you have to have this port installed in order to begin the dialysis procedure. So we got him all gowned up. He had a surgery time. We were in the pre-op room and he was in his gown, ready to go. The doctor comes out, takes one look at Garnet, who's not wearing a mask in the hospital, and says to him, "Where's your mask?" Garnet was medically exempt. He had a legitimate medical exemption written by his family doctor that he never showed to anyone because he knew it was within his rights to not show it to anyone. But he had it like a trump card in his pocket in case he ever really needed it. He said to the doctor, "I'm exempt. I can't wear one." And the doctor took his gloves off, stood up, shook his head and said, "We're not doing this today," and walked away from us.
You had
Garnet was
an appointment as well. Like it wasn't just
We
impromptu.
were there, yeah. So this was our time. Like that
Okay.
was Garnet's surgery
I knew
time.
that.
He was at 2% kidney function at that point. It's like a life or death situation. You need to have this surgery in order to start the life-saving treatment, which is dialysis. And the doctor refused to perform the surgery. So they were going to send us home. We had an argument with hospital administrators at that point, who are not doctors and not nurses. They were basically trying to tell us policy. And we said, we're not leaving, because he was admitted to the hospital in a life critical condition. And now you're telling us that we need to leave without treatment. This doesn't make any sense.
Wait a minute. Let me stop you there just a second. So Garnet's kidney function was 2%.
Yeah.
He needed dialysis. He needed the port put in. Doctor comes out, says, "Where's your mask?" He's medically exempt. You guys say, well, then he takes his gloves off, the doctor, and then turns around and says, "We're not doing this today."
Correct.
All right. So you then start talking to the hospital administration, and they actually tried to back this doctor up?
Yes, they said he was not obligated to perform the surgery if he chose not to, and that there was no other radiologist on the floor who was able to perform it. So they said we needed to go home until they were able to find another doctor who would perform the surgery.
Now, I remember turning to Dr. Trotzy when the first time we had this conversation, and I said, "Doc, 2%?" He goes, "Yeah, that's pretty much, the kidney's dead. And
Yeah.
this could be bad at any given time. Like he could die at any given time with 2% kidney function." And yet this doctor turns around and says, "We're not doing this today," and the administration backs him up. I can't even believe that these people are not up on charges yet. How is this even possible? How did you convince the hospital administration to reverse this decision? Because obviously you did do that.
We, well, they were going to send us home. We decided, rather than leave the hospital, to go and check ourselves into the emergency room. Because if you check yourself into the emergency room, you cannot be dismissed without being treated. And so
Okay, good thinking. Yep.
ourselves into emergency. We went to the triage nurse, who we told the whole story to. She took his blood pressure, took one look at where his blood pressure levels were, and said, "Okay, I'm going to be right back. I'm going to go talk to the doctor on the emergency room floor." And so she ended up getting us into the Red Wing, which is where the really critical cases are. That's where you see people who have just been in a car accident, who are losing blood, who have been, on a drug overdose. They're convulsing on their stretchers. Like, it's like serious business, So they put us in a room in that wing. And the doctor kind of came in and was like, "One of these things is not like the other. Like, what is this couple doing in my wing? They don't look like they're dying, But so he's like, "What's going on, guys?" And so we told him the whole story. We told him what happened upstairs with his colleague and how we were denied a surgery over a mask. He shook his head in very clear frustration and said, "I'm going to go make some phone calls and I will be right back." So he left. About 20 minutes later, came back and said, "Okay, I called dialysis and I called the radiology floor, and they are going to get you your surgery as soon as they can get their shit together upstairs," is what he said. So he basically yelled at them for sending us to his area or allowing us to get to that point, and said, "Why are you not doing your job? You need to perform the surgery. This man is not doing well." And so ultimately that's what happened, is we were sent right back upstairs to the exact same doctor. It was like deja vu. Except for this time, the doctor was told that he had been required to perform the surgery that he didn't want to perform.
Do we know who talked to this doctor? Was it just a conversation between the ER doc and this radiologist? Do you know what was said in this conversation, or no?
No, I don't have that. They did not add that to the file. I have a copy of Garnet's medical record, but that's not in there.
Interesting.
It's a big
So-
fight.
Yeah, like I'd like to know exactly what happened. I want to know, I mean, that's a pretty important part of this story, how
Yeah.
they convinced this radiologist who initially refused based upon Garnet not wearing a mask to all of a sudden decide, "Oh, I got to come out and do this."
Yeah.
So what happens after that? He came out and he did the procedure.
He did the procedure. The procedure was, they told me everything went very, very well, is what they told me when they exited the OR. But over time, and it was only a couple of hours, where we realized it didn't actually go very, very well, because they had packed his wound full of like bandages, and it was so the blood was just soaking through the bandages. So we were brought upstairs to dialysis to do a treatment right away. But during the treatment, he started like dripping blood through his shirt, and they were like, whoa, like the nurses in dialysis said to us and themselves, like, we've never seen someone lose that much blood through a central line insertion. So they changed the bandages right there, and then they sent us home and said, if it starts to like, bleed through again tonight, you can change the bandage yourself, which they're not supposed to do with an open wound like that that's connected to your heart. So anyways, they sent us home. We didn't actually take the bandage off because I didn't feel comfortable. We just added more gauze on top. But he still was losing a lot of blood, and he was already anemic, and it was just, anyways, you could tell that it was a botched surgery job. But within 48 hours of the surgery is when he started to get really serious fevers. He was having chills. He was like shaking and showing signs of infection. So we, at dialysis, when we were there the next time, he said, I don't think he's doing very well. Like, he's got a high fever and he's been shaking and stuff, and it's just not good. And so the nurse actually said, you know what, I think we should take a blood culture to see if there's an infection in his blood. So when you take a blood culture, you have to take a substantial amount of blood. It's a really big vial. And so they did this test. She didn't check it with the doctor first because she was like, well, this is a very clear and sign that this is what's happening. I need to take this test. The doctor comes in, his specialist, and he's like, I'm really mad at your nurse for taking that test. You're already really anemic. We can't take that much blood from you. So I'm really frustrated that she took those blood cultures. He just sort of like ranted to us in the room. Anyways, lo and behold, it comes back, and the blood culture is positive for a staph infection. And if that nurse had not gone basically against the doctor's orders and taken this culture, then who knows what could have happened? Because if you don't catch that kind of infection fast enough, then you're cooked, basically, right? Like, that's a really serious infection to have in your blood. So they started him on antibiotics. It was an IV antibiotic, which was a really, really strong one to try to get ahead of the staph infection that they found in his blood.
Megan, when was all this happening? Was this around the same time, Gal, you came for a visit? Like, was it around then?
This is still late September when this is all starting. So this is like towards the end of the month of September.
Okay.
But so the video that you saw at the beginning of the show, that was beginning of November, like early November. So it was only about a month and maybe a month and a half, and that's being generous, from the time that the surgery happened. So, I mean, his health just declined really fast. So the staph infection caused a lot of extra issues for him. He, like we said earlier, and you saw in the video, he had back spasms. He was in constant pain. He wasn't sleeping. You could hear him say, I can't breathe, in the video, because he was dealing with what we found out later was a collapsed lung, because the infection got into his lungs. It got into his spinal column. It got into his heart, ate away at his heart valves. He had leaky valves.
How much fluid did they drain out of his lung? You mentioned before, 4 liters?
4.5 liters. Yeah.
And they wouldn't have caught that if Megan and Garnet hadn't insisted that they get a chest x-ray. They actually refused to give him a chest x-ray a couple of times.
They told us it was normal that he couldn't breathe because he was a dialysis patient and he had too much water in his system. So they just needed to be more aggressive with the fluid pull at dialysis. But they basically were like, well, we don't need to do a chest x-ray. We already know what's happening. But then when they did finally, we pushed them to do a chest x-ray. That's when they diagnosed, oh, wow, look, your lung is collapsed.
He was often thirsty as well. Really wanted to have something like to satisfy his thirst. So he can't breathe. He's thirsty, just to add to the stress on the body, right? Over a long period of time. Not a lot of people can go through it, especially with the character of a man like that. So
it's still like his health was going down quickly. Did you notice during this time, because it sounds like there were certain medical people who wanted to do their jobs, and then it sounds like there were other people who were basing everything they did around COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
And I guess at that point, in the situation that you guys were in, you could spot that pretty quickly, right?
Oh, yeah.
That kind of person.
Yeah, Sudbury doesn't have a lot of people who were in the second camp. Everybody was very much like, this is the COVID regulation and this is what we're doing. I didn't find a lot of people in our city in the medical field who, wanted to have a real conversation about what was really going on. Everybody
It sounded like that ER doc, though. I mean, that ER doc, when, he said, wait a minute, what are you doing? You can't just walk away from this guy because he's not wearing a mask. So that guy sounded to me like he probably wanted to do real doctor stuff, right? And that nurse who took the test obviously probably wanted to do medical work as well, not just base her whole existence on COVID-19 regulations.
Right.
So, Gal, you go to see Garnet.
Yeah.
Had you seen him in a while? Had it been a couple of months or?
Yeah, it had been, I think, since the summer. I saw him in the summer last, probably in July or early August. So when I last saw him, he had an auto detailing business, and at the time he insisted, every time I came, he insisted on cleaning my truck for me, right? And at this time, he's, his health it's on the decline, and he's like struggling to do things, but he insisted on cleaning my truck, and I was like, Garnet, it's okay, don't worry about it. And but attention to detail, this man, like, he cared, right? And he wanted to show that he cared, and it started getting dark and he was running out of time, and my truck looked great, but it wasn't up to Garnet standards yet. And so he was so frustrated. He's like, man, I'll finish it tomorrow, we'll do it. I'm like, it's fine, like, it looks great, thank you, it's a work truck anyways, but he was, that's the type of man he was. He wanted to, if he's going to do a job, he wanted to do it well. But to touch on the experiences that, Megan and Garnet had at the hospital, and connect them back to what I mentioned earlier when Garnet said, racism's an issue, but I feel like the COVID stuff would kill me first, right? It's a perfect example because, when he was mistreated in the hospital for not wearing a mask or for not being vaccinated, they could kick him out, send him home, decline surgeries, all these things, right? Because of his mask, not wearing a mask. If any of that stuff happened in a hospital today and they refuse a surgery because he's black, like that doesn't happen, right? So like the discrimination that he faced because of the COVID measures was prevalent right there. Like, he'd talk to me all the time, like, man, like he'd go to Life Labs just to get blood
He'd be on video.
and he'd call us on video chat while he's there because they're trying to refuse him service. Like, they're not going to do his blood work and stuff, right? And it's because he's not wearing a mask, and like, he's exempt. Like, legally, he's following the rules, right? It's their rules. He's following them, and they just don't like it because he's on the other side, right? He's the bad guy. He's going to kill grandma. So just watching him face all that head on, even while his health, like, most people, they'd be like, oh, I'm in a wheelchair, you know what, I really need this medical care, I'm gonna either show my exemption or I'm just gonna put the mask on. But Garnet's like, no, like, I know my rights, you have to do this. I don't have to show you my exemption, and you have to do your job, right? And so the fact that he was still willing to stand on his morals and his principles, like, even in that state, it's just incredible strength and resilience. So
Let me ask you guys, this might be a touchy question, but what the hell? Danielle Smith, I think, said a couple of years ago that she'd seen the worst discrimination in Canada in our lifetimes, and it was all about not being vaccinated. And I want to ask you guys both, have you faced worse discrimination from being black or not being vaccinated, or the stand you've taken regarding COVID-19? Which has been the worst or the most obvious, the most hurtful?
So I'll jump into this first. For me, I think the reason a lot of people get sensitive when you draw the comparisons is because of the root cause of the discrimination, right? So if you think about, like, a racist who hates black people, right? And, I'm talking about, a straight white supremacist that uses the N-word, and, like, they just hate black people and think that they're subhuman, right? When someone is acting with that hate and malice towards you, it affects you on a deep level, right? When someone is like, this person's not wearing a mask, they're going to kill my grandma. Like, I can empathize with the thought process, although I disagree with it. I can empathize with, like, I understand this is a somewhat rational fear to them, right? So the difference in the reason for the discrimination, obviously racism takes the card on that. However, the frequency with which I experienced discrimination based on COVID stuff and the power that was behind it, right? The biggest thing for me was, I had a teaching job through Fanshawe College. I taught a trades course, and I had a contract offer that was rescinded because I didn't fill out the vaccine policy. I never had I never had a contract pulled because I was black, right? Like, the things that they were able to take away from me and able to refusing me from stores. I tried to take my little girl to buy skates. They wouldn't let me in the store. They said they'd bring a chair outside. It's the middle of the winter. They said they'd bring a chair outside and she could try on skates in the parking lot, right? And nobody in there had a problem with it, right? I'm having one-on-one conversations with people, trying to appeal to their humanity and be like, you want my 6-year-old daughter to sit out here in the snow and put skates on while everyone else is in the store? Does that make sense to you? Right? So those type of things, getting kicked out of a store and people clapping as you're walking out, right? Because, oh, you're an anti-masker, right? Those things don't happen when you're black. Not this time, not in our lifetime, right? I said at the conference, if someone's being racist to me in a store and other people notice, 9 times out of 10, that guy is getting kicked out of the store, or people are ostracizing them, and everyone's on my side, right?
Yeah.
If you're not wearing a mask and people are trying to kick you out of the store, everyone's on that team. They all want you out of the store, right? And you probably won't be allowed in. So absolutely, I would say that the discrimination that I faced in my lifetime, 100 times worse when it comes to not being vaccinated and not wearing a mask, for sure.
What about you, Devon? And if you don't want to talk about it, that's all right too, man.
No, like I had an issue at Enterprise, to be very specific, about a time where I was just trying to return a vehicle, and I'd been there a week before without a mask, and they rented the vehicle out to me. When I came back to return it and go through the paperwork and have the walk around and all that, they wanted me to wait outside as well, and I refused to leave the store. And they called the RCMP, and they showed up, and I had a discussion with them, and they threatened me to leave the store, like saying like, oh, I don't want to have an issue today. So, tough guy. I decided, for the betterment of our conversation, and I'll go outside and we'll have a chat there. And then, just the treatment in those situations. Like I was saying, like it's different when, it's a race thing, but when you're actually like standing up for these freedoms, you're standing up for the freedom of the person that is giving you hell right in that moment. You're like, I'm actually fighting for your freedom so that you can choose to not wear that and get that, right? And so that was the nuance that kind of like was loudest to me. It was like, when Garnet's been speaking to all these people and they're ragging on him, it's like he's actually fighting for your freedom too, right? And his words still stand true to that. So I think there's a whole lot of forgiveness that needs to happen in all those conversations, and people who didn't get invited to dinners because they weren't vaccinated. Actually, last night was having a conversation at a local store. One couple I worked with, the husband, and he got vaccinated, and his wife didn't. I'll use the word vaccinated. And they still were able to bond after the fact, that he realized like this vaccine like almost killed me. I've been getting sick all the time. And so that anger and like displeasure that he's feeling, that fire that started to burn in him, we need that more from the community. That like, yeah, we got duped, we got scammed, but like we got to be even like more on fire than ever, because they're taking us out. They're literally it's genocide.
Yeah. So let's move past Gal's visit, the surprise visit, the video we saw at the beginning, and get to the part now where, Megan, where we find out that he's going to need a transplant. There's no way that any sort of medical, nothing short of a transplant is going to save him.
Which is the diagnosis you get as soon as you get stage 5 as your diagnosis, because your kidneys are no longer functioning, and so your options are long-term dialysis or shorter term dialysis while you're waiting for a kidney transplant. Those are
Well,
the
you
only-
guys tried naturopaths too, right? For a short period of time.
Yes, correct. Which actually allowed us to maintain his health. Didn't improve it, but it allowed us to maintain his health at the level that he was at, which was still in kidney failure.
Shadow,
for
he
a
would
very long
hold
time.
up a bottle of sorry to make it public, but a bottle of his urine to show how much progress he'd made. Like, I mean, it was the small things, but like seriously, like we're fighting for our life here, right? And like I remember I'm downstairs because I'd been sleeping downstairs at the time, and then he sends me a pic on WhatsApp, and it's like a jug full. I was like, "Good job, man!" And like it was congratulated him, you know? So like those were the parts you just can't forget.
Hey, look at my piss. That's funny.
So the question was, Shadow, he was as far as the transplant is concerned. So we're on long-term dialysis, but even before commencing dialysis, we were told, you will need a transplant eventually. So let's talk about the protocol and what's required to get a transplant done. And the first question out of their mouth was, well, you need to have 2 COVID vaccines in order to commence this process. Are you willing to do that, or have you been vaccinated? Was the question. And so, I mean, the answer was an emphatic no. That's not something that's ever been required in Canada before now. So, and no, I'm not comfortable with the science. And we give all the reasons that an intelligent and reasonable person would give, I think, in that sort of situation. But that was basically enough for the hospital to essentially slam the door and say, well, too bad. If you're not going to comply with the vaccine mandate, then we cannot proceed or will not proceed with what else is required to get you on that transplant list. So we did not receive a place on the transplant list. We were not considered to be part of the Trillium program, to be an organ recipient. Both of these guys on the call here, they were both willing to donate their own kidneys as a living related live donor. And they even said to us at that point, it doesn't matter, because if the recipient is not vaccinated, it doesn't matter where the organ comes from, the procedure cannot be initiated without the vaccine.
So you had, at that point, I'm assuming you were trying other options, something that could have gotten around this ridiculous regulation that has never been done in Canada before. What did you do?
Well, we were ready to essentially argue with them. We were compiling a lot of information as far as legal information, scientific information about these vaccines and why it would be a bad choice for him to take it as a kidney transplant patient, as a type 1 diabetic, as a person with a list of health complications, because as most people know, these shots were not tested on anybody but the healthiest portion of the population. So the only people in the control groups for these vaccine trials were people who had no health complications whatsoever. And
well, Megan, I mean, at that time, we all knew exactly. I mean, that they'd already done the Pfizer dump on Twitter or on X. So
right.
we knew the complications. We knew all of it. And
well, what I'm saying is that they never did trials even on someone with type 1 diabetes. They never did trials on someone who is a kidney patient. So they just don't know, how is this going to impact this person's health if we mandate this for this person who has these pre-existing conditions, right? So that
not to mention that it's an autoimmune disease, and that's probably one of the things that these things attack first. Do they make it worse, or they give you a new one?
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Did you get any legal advice on this? Did you hire a lawyer?
He didn't.
At this time,
Go ahead.
we want to know, at this time, while the transplant's being discussed, Garnet is still fighting off the staph infection, right?
Yeah.
And still in recovery from that. So he does make a recovery from the staph infection, and he's in good health while we're that was just this whole journey that Megan's talking about. So,
but let's be honest. I mean, the clock is ticking here now at this stage of the game. You know that transplant sooner rather than later is absolutely required, and you're fighting with the system. Was there ever one person who was speaking on behalf of the system, or was it the frustration that they always give you? Hold, please, and you'll go to the next department, and so on and so on and so on. That's a lot of that.
That's how this game is played, right, Shadow? Is that everybody's passing the buck. So if you ever get into a fight like this, and you're trying to find a person to talk to or a person to source the responsibility for this decision, you won't find one because it just goes in circles. So what happens is the individual hospitals will make a transplant policy related to the COVID vaccine. The hospital, makes the policy based off of public health recommendations. Public health, when you go to them and say, well, why are you telling hospitals to recommend the COVID vaccine? You're not doctors or whatever. They'll say, oh, well, they're just recommendations. This is not a requirement. So then they pass you back to the hospital, right? So it's this whole big circus where you end up not having anybody who's taking responsibility for this. And I mean, we all know the reason why they're not taking responsibilities for this is because I think they all know that this is all questionable legality, right? So there's not one person who's willing to say, I'm the one who signed that policy, I made this decision, or whatever the case may be, because that just doesn't exist.
I was going to say, I don't know what your opinion at that time of the media was. And I don't think it would have helped you anyway. I mean, now I feel like, man, if you would have gotten on this show and if you would have gotten on a few other independents across the country and just gotten this out at that time, it might have made a difference. It maybe. I mean, if you could get it to the Minister of Health for the province or somebody important, somebody who can make noise about this. Because the same thing was going on to a poor lady in Alberta, I think right around that time or maybe just before that.
Yeah,
and
Sheila, we're in contact. Sheila Lewis and I, we chatted quite a bit.
Did you?
So we did, yeah. I had her personal contact info and we talked. But I mean, what ended up happening with her is she ended up having to fundraise to try to go to the United States to get this done because there was not a hospital in Canada who would take her.
Right.
And ultimately, through litigation, she came to a settlement, and they were going to. I mean, this is not confirmed because she couldn't talk about the whatever, but I mean, you can put the pieces together. They were going to perform the surgery in Alberta, but then before they could schedule a surgery date is when she passed away. So, I mean, you can take from that what you will. Like she settled in court, she won her fight, but at the same time, they just delayed and took too long, and put the surgery date off, and then she was not able to actually get what she needed.
Yeah, and so I guess the same process you guys could have gone through and tried to wait it out, but it's just shameful. What about the American thing? Was that ever discussed? Doing a fundraiser and heading down to the States?
It was something that we considered doing, but I mean, he was just so weak for such a long time, and the timeline here was very short. I mean, his health took a dive just over for like 5 weeks, and then he was just on an uphill, battle trying to get out of it. And ultimately what ended up happening is he started to win his fight. Like he physically was getting stronger. He was amazing. All of his doctors, his lung recovered to an 85% inflation rate, which was something they said he would never have. He, was checking off all the boxes. He was winning everything. And he was
taking the medicine.
What's that now?
I said without taking their medicine.
Yeah. We were still pursuing natural. We were working with a homeopath. We were working with a naturopath. We had Ayurvedic medicine on the go at the same time as doing all of the other allopathic medicines. And so, he was regaining his strength, so much so that his kidney specialist said, we're at the point where I can graduate you to home dialysis because you're getting so much stronger and you're doing so much better. So he had the surgery in his stomach to be able to perform dialysis in a different fashion that was also safer. Everything was looking up and it was looking amazing, which made his death like that much more aggravating, I think, and painful when it happened because he ultimately died of complications from long-term hemodialysis, which is the one that he had started with that, caused him so much harm in the beginning.
I just want to add, like you did mention that, like possibly it could have been different if we'd had a voice, sooner than Garnet's passing. And as Garnet was going through his struggles, he was often thinking of others and who he would pave the way for next. And, thank you for the opportunity to share candidly about, our life and Garnet's experience. And hopefully we can stop this from happening again because it is still happening.
Yeah, we can't let this happen again. This is outrageous what happened. I mean, you guys lost a lot. Your kids lost a lot. Megan, you lost your man.
Everything.
So I'm going to ask you the question I asked you that night on the stage, because a lot of people are thinking it. And I loved your answer, by the way, when you answered me a couple of weeks ago. Did you ever ask him to take the vaccine?
I would never have done that. I couldn't have done that. It would have destroyed him as a person. It would have been completely against his character. So it really, honestly, was not even a thought in my mind. It was always, we're going to find another way because this is all going to blow over, is what it felt like. And that's the approach that we took the entire way along. And what I had said to you in the original interview was, if he would have taken that vaccine, it would have destroyed his spirit and he wouldn't have been Garnet anymore. And that would have been the biggest tragedy of the entire ordeal. And that's something that he could not have sacrificed.
What was the rest of the family saying? I mean, your brothers, sisters, aunt, uncle, mom, dad, what were they saying, guys?
You know, I'll just speak on, like, it's hard to, I don't want to misquote anybody, but
You don't need to name names.
no, but there were people in the area, you know, where Garnet, like, he literally lived, like, Megan lives on the hill, Long Lake Hill, and it's an artery that connects, you know, just the bush, I guess, to, like, Long Lake area to the city. And for him to see, like, people coming and going, our parents stopped in quite often, aunt and uncle, you know, just to be there, be a presence. And there's mixed feelings, I guess, from the medical direction, I guess. Like, Garnet, you know, if you listen, maybe things would be better for you. Not a direct quote, but I think my dad would have recommended that Garnet kind of follow a little more direction from the, you know, Health Sciences North. Guys, correct me if you think otherwise.
Well, I didn't have the conversation that you had, but I think it's important to note here that Dr. Mark Trossi pointed out that given Garnet's status of a type 1 diabetic, it would have been catastrophic for him to take the vaccine. He's the absolute worst candidate to be taking the COVID injections. So Garnet was right about that, regardless of what anyone in the family was saying. But yeah, as far as people in the family, there was...
Right, like,
yeah.
there was, like, maybe Garnet should, like, stay at the hospital, get the complete treatment there, maybe not get vaccinated, but be there in their care, you know, long term, like, you know,
that dad did give that advice, Devon,
Yeah,
and
well,
I had to correct him a lot of times and say, listen, we are complying with everything the doctor is telling us to do.
right.
There's not anything that we did with his kidney treatment that was against protocol or against doctor's advice, except for we chose not to get the vaccine.
Yeah. Everybody in the family knew that Garnet wasn't going to get the vaccine. Everybody knew that. It wasn't like, oh, let's convince Garnet. Like, there was none of that.
There was none of that, yeah. So when he died, you guys say he was on the upswing, right? Like, it looked like he was fighting back maybe, and he'd have a little bit more time. Was there a specific event that led up to his passing, or did it just kind of happen? Did you guys sense it was coming?
He had been having this sort of, there was a puzzlement as far as why he was getting migraines during his dialysis session for about a month prior. He was complaining about it. He told the doctors about it. We were trying to get them to say, like, you know, is there anything in the chemistry of the blood that could be causing this? Because it's triggered by dialysis. Literally, he cannot finish his dialysis session because his migraine gets to be so bad. And crickets. They had no answers for us. It's like they had never seen it before. They were confused, you know, but they also didn't run any tests or actually try to figure this out. So it was one of those maddening things where it's like, he's having these migraines. There's something going on that's causal between dialysis and something in his head. But they had zero answers. And so that was a frustrating component, but that was going on in the background. And then ultimately he had during dialysis one time, because of this migraine and also a combination of migraine and a low blood sugar incident, he had a stroke-like episode where he literally, his face froze. His mouth couldn't make words. You could see the panic in his eyes, but he couldn't do anything about it. It was extremely scary. We went on to Emerge that day, and they did all the scans and everything, but it all came back clear and negative, and there was nothing there. So we were dismissed from the hospital. Again, no answers to that incident. And then it was only 6 weeks after that he died at home. Well, he didn't die at home. He had a stroke at home in the middle of the night, and I was woken up to the sound of him falling, and had to call the paramedics because he was having a low blood sugar, and I couldn't get him to take his juice box, and it was really serious. So I thought he was going into a diabetic coma, but ultimately it was diagnosed as a stroke when he got to the hospital.
Do you guys know if he knew that the end was coming? Did you have that conversation with him, any of you?
So when Garnet was when he was fighting off the staph infection, and actually that trip in November from the video, I remember talking to Garnet. Well, actually, the three of us, Garnet, Devon, and I, were all sitting in chairs under the carport talking, and at one point we stopped talking and sat there in silence, which almost never happened in our history, being brothers together. And we all just kind of started crying, and without anyone saying it, it really just felt like, this could be the last time we all sit here together. And that was a difficult time, but we fought through that. And Garnet, we saw Garnet recovering, and so that whole thought of Garnet leaving, that left our minds. And knowing Garnet my whole life is like, he's a fighter, he's invincible, he'll make it through everything. And I had no doubt that he was going to beat it. And the night before he passed, I was there because I came up to visit for the May long weekend. And the Friday night, he's giving me a tour of the house. He's rearranged furniture. He's showing me his office his study where he's going to be doing his lives from, where he kind of fires up the people, brings people together, right? He was wanting to get back into his activism work because he was feeling good. He was able to walk up and down the stairs, right? Which was huge, because last time I saw him, I was helping him in and out of his wheelchair. And, he's walking up the stairs at one point after showing me the basement. And I, of course, went to go help him. And he's like, no, I got it. And I was like, okay. So he's walking up, and I'm, kind of walking carefully behind him in case he falls. But I was surprised at how well he was going up. And about halfway up the stairs, he stops and he looks back at me and he's like, you like that shit? So he's very optimistic. And yeah, it definitely didn't, there was no ominous vibes around. It was, he's going to beat it. So I don't usually sleep with my phone on silent, but I was at my parents' place and the kids were sharing a bed with me. So I woke up because someone had called. I think Sister Emmy had called my wife's phone and said that I need to check my phone because Megan was trying to call me. And so I saw the 20 missed calls or whatever it was, and my heart just dropped. And my sister told Holly that I had to get to the hospital because Garnet had a stroke. Yeah, so I got in the truck and I flew to the hospital, and Megan called me, or I think I tried calling her when I was on the way, and she told me on the way Garnet had a stroke and he's not going to make it. And at that time, I'm about halfway to the hospital. Definitely wasn't driving safely. I just remember she said it, and I just didn't believe her. I was like, I didn't know what to say. I'm crying, and I was like, okay, like, do you want me at the house or the hospital? And she's like, yeah, come here. So I left. I kept driving, hung up the phone, and the whole time I was driving there, I just, I kept saying no out loud to myself, like, no, no, no. And I got there, and it's like, he'll be fine once I see him, like he's. Anyway, so
hard, man.
Yeah.
You're telling it. You're telling it.
So yeah, then I got up to the room. I'm out in the hall with Megan, and her dad was there. And before we get to go into the room, the nurse comes out and she's kind of giving us a heads up, telling us what machines he's hooked up to and what's going on. Lets us know, he's not going to make it and stuff like that. But she also notes that Trillium is going to be calling, and Megan's kind of like, what? And I'm behind her like, Trillium, like organ donation, like what? And she's like, the nurse stops herself because she realizes the situation, and she's like, you know what, you don't have to worry about that right now. We'll talk to you about that after. So then we got into see Garnet. Megan, I'll let you take over about that with the phone call.
Trillium.
Trillium, for anybody not from Ontario, is Ontario's organ donation program, the Trillium Foundation. So that's another one of the buck passers, I guess, so to speak, because when you're looking at all of these different policies that are surrounding organ donation, obviously the Trillium Foundation's name comes up in those conversations, and they had their own policies, and again, was all based on these recommendations that were circular. But ultimately, they call you when your loved one is dying, and I'll make that like very specific and say they call you before they're dead, because they need the organs to still be alive for them to be viable. So the scene is, I'm sitting in the ICU, my husband is on life support, and the phone rings, and it's the Trillium Foundation wanting to take a medical history to discuss the viability of his 7 different organs that they're interested in. And so she sort of offers these empty condolences because that's just part of her job, I guess. And then she starts launching into her script that she has in front of her. And I cut her off. I'm like, listen, I'm going to stop you right there, because I'm not interested in going through my husband's medical history with you over the phone right now. Because the reason why he's laying in this bed is because your program disqualified him from receiving an organ to save his life. And so I said, as long as that injustice exists in this province, I won't be participating in your organ donation program, and I'm not going to be completing your survey.
You said it that matter-of-factly, emotionless, because it's, I mean, the way you sound right now is pretty even-tempered, Megan, and, I would have been a little bit more upset. Probably a colorful metaphor or two would have thrown at her.
You know what, Shadow? It's really difficult to describe the feelings that you have in a moment like that when, your entire reality has come crashing down and is imploding on you. I think in a lot of ways I was still in shock, but then trying to find ways to express the injustice that my family had suffered and try to somehow educate this person, because if you can, Devon and I, before the show, we watched this video of Garnet and him just sitting at our kitchen table, and Garnet's short of breath and he's very sick, and it was a live video he put out on Facebook, and he's like, you know what, each one teach one, and that was just one of his simple little slogans that he always repeated, and it was that sort of mantra, I guess, that was ringing in my head at the time, where it's like, yeah, I'm like, this is an impossible situation. And I mean, you're kind of outside of your body. It's like this really weird experience where you're still questioning the reality. Like, is this actually happening to me? But then at the same time, that it is happening to you. You have no tears left to cry in that moment because you've been crying for 24 hours. You're furious, but at the same time, you're numb because, the worst possible thing in your life has just happened to you, short of your own passing. It was a really, really strange time full of really strange emotions. Anyway, so I mean, the guys here, maybe they can explain a little better. I don't know if you have better recollection than I do as far as what the conversation went, what happened, because I remember having the conversation. I remember what I said. But again, it's sort of one of those, you're in this trance, they're sort of in this daze, so yeah.
she really did walk the line perfectly of making sure that the woman on the other side of the phone felt felt the injustice of it. Um, I really can't like, my hat goes off to Megan. She handled that phone call in the best possible way. She
I-
made sure that woman, I'm sure she talked to other people and told them about that phone call. I'm positive of it because, yeah,
She
there's
told
no
me
way.
that was the first time that she had heard that this was something that was happening in Ontario.
Yeah,
And I think
There-
Garnet
there-
would have been happy too, Megan, that you were showing like love your enemies, right? Even in the moment of you have, you know, what people would see as a valid excuse to not love your enemies. And so for me, that really like that's what that means to me. And I think Garnet would probably Garnet would agree. So thank you for that.
That's what Garnet was about. He didn't hate them. He just thought they were misguided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, there's lots of people in this community that Garnet's started that you know, they were wearing masks or lining their kids up. He had those conversations where it's like, "Hey guys, guess what I did today?" You know, or we'd be there witnessing it and like, you know, deter someone from, you know, an experimental drug, right? Like those were really like he wasn't just like pretending. You know, he had everything to lose by making the stand, and for him to just embrace that and you know, and be loud about it, you know, it was just really the character is strong, and but his blood cries out because it's innocent blood. And
What
like
what legacy did he want to leave behind?
the kids were always around. Garnet was always about the kids and the next generation. And so for him to take the stand that he did, and I in a way still does because that energy is still moving, right? We will carry the torch as well and the fire that he, you know, was part of igniting for the next generation. Like the kids are awesome to see play at the park, you know, run around and there's not if there's caution tape up, it can come down. We're gonna have a good time, you know, and um, it's like our responsibility to, you know, raise our kids in a community that will take care of, you know, the adults when they get old. For example, like Garnet and I talked about having communities all across the country to kind of knit us together, you know, and meet with people that so if Dr. Trozzi's services are needed in, you know, BC, you know, or wherever across the country, how can we make this happen and provide for each other on the way? So like it was something that like I say, when we're on the hill, it's like the hill to die on. This is it. Like it's each other. That's all we have is each other.
yeah.
I think in
And
answer to your question about legacy, Shadow, I think Garnet, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering if we pursued legal action. This is a question that I get asked a lot, and whether we considered that and whether we tried to go that route. The answer is, yeah, we tried. We went to 3 different influential lawyers who are quite prestigious across the country. And we were unequivocally given the same answer, which is that given the circumstances of Garnet's health leading up to the kidney transplant issue, the doctors would be too protected and we would essentially be wasting our money and effort because they would be able to hide behind his pre-existing conditions of diabetes and other things and say that his death was inevitable regardless of what their actions were. And unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of people I've learned who are going through these medical malpractice suits in Canada. The doctors are very protected. The industry is very circle the wagons type where they don't turn on each other. And you'll be hard pressed to find people who are doctors who are willing to testify against other doctors. And so it gets to be very, very, very complicated. So ultimately, I made the decision to take the money that Garnet and I had set aside because he wanted to pursue legal action when it was all over. We were planning that. And I've turned that into just positive projects around my house and investing into my kids and just doing a lot of other community work and things like that instead, because I think that that's a more positive use of our energy and what Garnet would have wanted, rather than trying to like just drive us into a hole to prove a point, you know? So we're sharing his story. We're doing things like this as best we can. We are organizing an event for his birthday here locally in Sudbury. We're doing a local 3-on-3 tournament for basketball. It's one of his favorite sports he loved to play. So the boys are coming up, and we're gonna have a really great weekend together.
If you
and we're-
guys were doing a golf tournament, I'd be there. But I'm not a big basketball guy. Sorry.
All right.
maybe we'll do a future event, Shadow. We'll invite you. Make sure.
I'd love to.
It's on the docket. I do want to touch on just kind of piggyback on what both Megan and Devon said. As far as the legal stuff, one of the things that I found interesting that I didn't know until we were looking into pursuing legal action is if you don't take absolutely everything they prescribe you, they can just kind of wash their hands of it and be like, well, you didn't do what we told you to do, so that's why it worked out that way. So they literally prescribed Garnet medication that we know would kill him, so he didn't take it, right? And then they even acknowledge like, oh yeah, no, he shouldn't have taken that, right? But because he didn't take it and it was a written prescription, that right there washes them, they're clean from everything that happened after that because, well, you didn't do what we told you to, so you can't come after us, right?
And it's the same case too with the doctor who initially denied him for the mask, for the implant for his port, because he ultimately changed his mind and decided to go ahead with the surgery. Then there's no legal action there.
Well, here's an interesting question that I might ask as just an observer to one of these doctors. I would say, so let's just take COVID and the vaccine and all of that out of this. Knowing what you know about Garnet's health, type 1 diabetic, would you have tried to save his life, even in that situation, regardless of vaccine? Well, of course I would. Well, then why does this vaccine that doesn't work, doesn't stop transmission, and possibly could be dangerous matter? Simple question. And you would think that a question like that, because obviously the answer is, yeah, I'd try and save him. But and you'd think that something like that would be like so logical to most people, right? Just for straight. Go ahead, man.
We have a name for them. So there's brainwashed, and I'm just gonna say it, and then there's rinsed. When you're rinsed, like, you're not even gonna bother.
There's no coming back.
There's no coming back from being rinsed. So
how can we find you guys on social media? Where do we find out about the events, Garnet's birthday event, or how do we stay in touch? Is what I'm asking. How do people watching this right now send you messages? How do they find you?
You could find us individually, kind of on any like Instagram, Facebook, but we have a site for Garnet. It's www.garnet.com, and the 4 in the A in Garnet is a 4. He was the 4th of the Harpers, and 4 Garnet. We're doing things.
You just need to spell it. Just spell it properly for the people.
Okay.
G4RNET.com.
Thank you, Gal.
The website hasn't been updated yet. Devon and I are getting together next week, actually. So just before the event, we should have time to update that. But we're going to start a mailing list because we've got a lot of events planned and a lot of things coming up this summer, actually, that we're really excited to share with people. But for right now, it's really just on social media. We do have there's an Instagram page that's G4RNET.Harper for Garnet Harper. So that's one that we're using there. But really, it's just individually at the moment until the summer when we get things rolling. Because
how many times? Go ahead, Megan.
Garnet did not go under his real name on Facebook. So if anybody wants to go and pull up, his account is still active, and all of his live videos and activism are all there. But if you want to find him, you have to go with his sort of alias name, which is Lando, Lando Elijah.
He was really proud of his middle name, Orlando, because, Trinidad and Tobago, the heritage there. And he was just like, yeah, Lando's it. And we have a cousin named Orlando, too. So
Lando?
Lando Elijah.
Elijah is his name on Facebook, and you can find all of his videos and content there.
Oh, cool! I wish I'd have known that before. Now I do. I'm gonna go check out. I'm gonna have a Garnet Harper marathon tonight.
good watch.
I want to thank you guys. How many times more are you willing to tell this story? As many times as it takes?
We're on the hill, man. We're on the hill.
Any opportunity we get, absolutely.
Yeah, freedom.
All right, you guys. Thank you.
My daughter tonight, she goes, "Mom, you told this story so many times. Doesn't everybody know this already?" And I'm like, you know what? Unfortunately not. So we're going to keep on talking about it till everybody does.
And Judah, the little one, says Hong Kong.
That's right.
All right, you guys. Thanks for coming on tonight. Stay in
Thanks, Shadow.
touch. Love you guys.
Thank you, Shadow.
Bye. The Harper family. Garnet Harper. Yeah, that's what I think I'm going to do tonight. I am going to have a Garnet Harper marathon. Lando Elijah on Facebook. I'm going to go look him up, and I'm going to go have a marathon. Sunday night, there will be a show on the website, shadowdavis.com. And you guys who are all access members, feel free to join. Now, listen, I watched a very disturbing video today on Alex Jones, and I'm going to play that video, and I'm going to get the woman who was on that video as a guest on this show in the next couple of weeks. It's important we hear this stuff. The cabal, the globalists, they're not done with us. And they're still trying to push everything they can through. And it's important that you guys hear everything. So I'm going to try and get that woman on the show. As it is right now, we have Catherine Christensen coming on the show Tuesday night. She's with Valor Law out of Ottawa. She's representing the Canadian Armed Forces members who were dismissed or roughly disciplined because they refused to take the COVID shots. And I do have a couple of more guests I'm still lining up for next week. We're just juggling dates right now. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I love you all, and I appreciate you all, and I will talk to you again Sunday night, all access, shadowdavis.com. And if you're not a member, I'll catch you Monday night at 8 o'clock Central on all the socials. Bye for now.